Well, good afternoon, everyone. We were all extraordinarily impressed with the address of the Prime Minister of Israel today to the joint session of Congress. No country understands better the threat that a nuclear-armed Iran presents than the Israelis. We appreciate his coming. We were grateful for his advice. I just began the process of putting onto the calendar the Corker bill, which I'll ask Senator Corker to describe in a moment, but I think you're familiar that it would require that the President submit any agreement with the Iranians to Congress. This bill will ripen by next week. It will be on the floor of the Senate for debate next week. We think the timing is important. We think it will help prevent the administration from entering into a bad deal. But if they do, then it will provide an opportunity for Congress to weigh in, as Senator Corker will point out, which has almost always been the case in the past on these kinds of agreements. With that, let me turn to the Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee.
Thank you, Leader. I think all of you know we've been working for some time on a way for Congress to weigh in on one of the biggest foreign policy issues that most of us have dealt with while we've been here, while we're here. I began working on this with Lindsey Graham some time ago and numbers of other senators. As you know, last Friday we reached an agreement with 6 Democrats to give Congress a role in the actual approval of this deal. As you may know, with the sanctions regime, there are some UN Security Council sanctions. Those are not a part of this. There are some executive branch sanctions. Those are not a part of this. But what this does do, since Congress ultimately is going to have to permanently raise any sanctions, suspend any sanctions that take place, it allows us to vote on that on the front end. So for 60 days, if there's a deal that's reached, for 60 days it would lay before Congress. We would have the opportunity for hearings and to have classified briefings and to understand what the President has agreed to. And during that period of time, Congress can either approve, disapprove, or take no action at all. It also allows us, if there's a deal that's reached and if it's not disapproved, and as it moves ahead, every 90 days, the President has to certify to us that they are not developing a nuclear weapon, that there is no covert activity occurring, and there's no terrorism being conducted against U.S. or its allies. So during that period of time, we would also have the opportunity to weigh in. I would think anybody who ran for the United States Senate and cares about the big issues facing our nation would want to support this piece of legislation. I appreciate the fact that the leader is going to allow time for us to work this through the committee. I've signaled to Senator Menendez that we'd like to have a committee hearing next Tuesday, which will happen simultaneous to the action that he's taking right now. So I appreciate his commitment to Congress playing a role in this. I think everyone in America should want the House and the Senate to weigh in on this most important agreement that may be reached, and I'm glad we're going to have the opportunity to do so.
I thought the Prime Minister this morning made a really compelling argument for why Senator Corker's legislation is so important, and that is the incredible dangers of a nuclear-armed Iran. Unfortunately, all we've had so far are extensions and delays, and it's pretty clear that when you've got a country that has said they want to wipe Israel off the map, that level of hatred, that level of hostility coupled with a nuclear capability is a recipe for disaster. And it's critically important that any deal must be acceptable to the American people. And that's why Congress's voice in this process is so important. And I hope that we'll get more support for Senator Corker's legislation. And as the American people start to digest and absorb the Prime Minister's remarks today and the very plain case he made for how important it is that we not get a bad deal, a deal that makes matters worse, not only for Israel and for the region, but for the United States and for the world, and that more people come to the conclusion that Congress needs to have its voice heard, and that we'll get more and more support, Republican and Democrat, here in the United States Senate and the House for Senator Corker's legislation.
Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will hold a very consequential hearing on the President's health care law. As the law was being written behind closed doors by the Democrats, it was specifically written in a way that only people who lived in states where they had set up a state exchange, that only those people would be eligible to get subsidies related to their health insurance. The President has overreached again and has applied the law in a way that I believe is illegal. So in King versus Burwell tomorrow, the hearing will be specifically on that. I'll be in the court with a number of other senators and congressmen interested to listen to the discussion as to whether the law actually means what it says, or if it means what the President wishes it says. Since the beginning of the year, Republicans in the House and the Senate have been meeting together to come up with a proposal to protect the people who are harmed by the law, but not to protect the law itself. We have a temporary bridge planned to transfer power away from the federal government to the states, to individuals, that provides freedom, flexibility, and choice at the local level, empowers people more. So it'll be interesting to watch, and I'm hoping that the Supreme Court comes out with a ruling that actually makes the President's actions, defines them as illegal, and makes it clear to the President he can no longer ignore the law.
Senator McConnell, will you also be doing a vote on the Iran sanctions legislation from Senator Kirk next week?
Well, the bill will be open for amendment, and what I indicated was, and it could well be voted on as an amendment during the course of this debate on the Corker proposal. Certainly, if no agreement is reached, we'll need to ratchet up the sanctions. Arguments have been made by some of our friends on the other side in the administration that the choice was between this deal and war. That's not the choice. The choice is between this deal and tougher sanctions. And so the Kirk-Menendez approach is the sanctions approach. Could well be considered in the course of the debate on the amendment, on the proposal that I'm putting on the calendar, or it could be brought up later if there is no deal and we need to ratchet up the sanctions further.
Chairman Hatch has had some trouble reaching a compromise deal on a trade bill with the Democrats. Will you give full time for a trade bill that doesn't have Democratic support?
Well, we certainly would like to pass a trade promotion authority. It's one of the few things it seems like we agree with the President. Hopefully we can work this out and go forward, because we all know without trade promotion authority there will be no trade agreement, and a trade agreement is obviously in the best interest of our country.
Do you intend to have a bill ready to go by the time of the ruling by the end of June? Will you commit to that?
Well, we won't know what the court is going to decide probably until June, but Senator Barrasso, if he's still here, has already suggested that
will you have a bill ready to go?
We're working on a temporary transition for people who may end up losing their insurance, as the Supreme Court shows that the President has acted illegally. I don't think anyone really clearly, fully anticipated what the Supreme Court was going to do last time. So we have to see exactly what the Supreme Court rules. There were a number of us that had an op-ed in the Washington Post Monday. There's one in the Wall Street Journal today outlining our commitment to protect the people that are hurt by the law, but not protect the law itself.
Okay, thanks very much.